Welcome back to Global Trials Accelerators, the podcast where we dismantle the barriers to clinical innovation and explore the strategies driving the next generation of life-saving therapies. Today's episode is a special one because today's guest is not a stranger to this microphone. Years ago, in an earlier chapter of this show, Gerardo Noriega sat down with my predecessor and the founder of this podcast, Julio Martinez Clark, for a conversation about Latin America as a clinical trial powerhouse. So when the chance came to bring Gerardo back, this time to talk about how the playbook has evolved in 2026, I jumped at it. It is a real honor to pick up the thread of this conversation. Gerardo is the president and CEO of PercAssist Corp, a Silicon Valley company developing eVAD systems. Gerardo is the president and CEO of PercAssist Corp, a Silicon Valley company developing the eVAD system for heart failure and cardiogenic shock. He brings over 30 years of experience in this industry, spanning a transition from Lima to San Francisco in the 1970s, as well as the launch of 5 ventures and advising more than 50 startups, resulting in a unique perspective of decades-long Bay Area experience. But a lot has changed since the first conversation. Back then, the discussion was about opportunities, where to run trials, how to find the right physicians, and why Latin America deserved a serious look. Today, the conversation is about survival. We're sitting inside the 2026 patent cliff, roughly 300 billion in annual sales rolling off exclusivity. And that has rewired the entire ecosystem. Strategics are hunting for de-risk assets, capital has gone selective, and the founders who make it through are those who generate world-class clinical evidence at the speed of capital. This is exactly what Gerardo has built. And what he has done across clinical operations, regulatory strategies, and capital formation is frankly a masterclass for anyone trying to get a medical device across the finish line in 2026. Welcome back to the show. It's really a privilege to have you with us again.
Thank you, Jesus. Thank you so much for taking the time to meet me today. And it was a pleasure to share my journey with you and Julio, whom I know for a long, long time. And I have a special, friend to me and wonderful person. So let's take it away, Jesus.
Absolutely. Thank you, Gerardo. And I would like to start from the beginning. You made the move from Lima to San Francisco in the 1970s. A pretty different shift, both personally and professionally. What did that transition look like for you, and how did that ultimately lead you into medtech?
Thank you, Jesus, for a wonderful question. My journey started in July 7, 1977, when I landed in San Francisco, and I was fortunate enough to be welcomed by my uncle Victor in San Francisco in his house and by the avenues. So upon arrival, my English was zero, pretty much nothing other than close a window because it was so cold. Summer in San Francisco, as you know, is very, very cold. So, he said, let's go and register, at the university to learn English. So that was the first step, like pretty much upon arrival. And the university was about 10 blocks from the house. So, but I was so afraid to take the bus because I said, what happened if I get lost? I wouldn't be able to talk to anybody. Not knowing that San Francisco is a very diverse city in which you have multiple people from multiple nations. So I think I would have been okay taking the bus, but I was afraid. So I just walked to the school both ways, and I didn't have any friends, anybody. So it was good, anyway. So learned English very quickly. Got going. After that, my journey expanded. By then, I had more friends and able to communicate, which is so important, shaping my a little bit my life as an immigrant. Honestly, my intent was always to stay for 6 months, and I've been here for 50 years now. So that's kind of the beginning of the journey in the United States. Obviously, the situation was quite different at the time. I don't see how now, looking back, I think it was a pretty daring move on my part, such a young age to take this big journey. Probably I wouldn't do it again. That's just my thinking now, obviously. It's easy to look back, right? But that
Mhm.
was the time and the opportunity was there and I was welcomed by my uncle Victor, was a wonderful gentleman, very successful, and so guide me through good things.
Wonderful. And how did you get involved in medtech?
Well, after learning English, obviously, I needed to further my education, which was the intent all along anyway. So I went to the engineering school at San Jose State University, where most of my teachers were from industry. I would say all my classes were early in the morning, like at 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, and then after 4 o'clock, where the professors were available after work. So all my training has been the latest in technology, from these professors, and also very hands-on. Silicon Valley, as you know, is always innovating, always moving forward, not only in the United States, but worldwide. I travel throughout the world trying to find a place like Silicon Valley, and honestly, I haven't found one that has these dynamics. And it changes with the years, you know what I mean? So that's what happened. And it started in telecommunications, fiber optics, and a company hired me to work on that. 3 months into my first job, my boss told me that he was being laid off, and he said, "Now you are the head of engineering." And here I am, a young engineer with 3, 4 months of training. And he said, "No, don't worry, I trained you well." So I took the opportunity and moved forward. I realized that the company was counting on me to advance the technology, so I hired other engineers to help me. And because at the end of the day, it's a group effort, right? Regardless, one individual cannot take it on his own. So then an opportunity came. A company recruited me to work in neurology, in coils for the brain, for aneurysms in the brain. So I told them that I was not familiar with, medical field. I'm a technology type of person. But I told them, no, you have the right skills, for us. So it will train you. So fantastic. I started to work on it, and pretty soon I realized that this was the thing that I wanted to do going forward. But I wanted to add technology to the device. I always wanted to add more in the electromechanical communication type of thing, even if it's looking for opportunities to advance the technology by adding electronics, software, those type. Even though I'm not a software engineer, but I know enough to add technology to whatever I worked on, and I realized that in just every single invention that I created or I worked on, there is some level of software, hardware, electronic communication type of thing, and very much Silicon Valley like. After
Yes,
that,
infused with the sorry, I was going to say infused with the DNA of San Francisco, Silicon Valley technology entrepreneurship.
indeed, that's exactly what this was about. I so I joined this small company, and I was very very happy there. And the company eventually went public, or and then acquired. And I said, well, I did okay. So I was able to purchase my first condominium when the company went public, and well, it's not too bad. Then other company, now my name was out, in the market, so other smaller companies, reach out to me, and expanded my offerings again into the ultrasound, imaging, stenting. So now you have electromechanical, into the pool of things. So again, that company also was acquired by a larger company. Once the companies get acquired by a larger organization, then it's not my thing. It's not, I don't mind, but it becomes too bulky, too slow, and I like speed, execution. That's my thing. It's called vision and execution. That is my driving force behind whatever I do. Dream about it, but make it happen. Because there is lots of dreamers, but not everybody is able to execute. I do. I execute, whether good or bad, because you don't know what you don't know. So I just put into practice whatever I have in mind.
Of
That
course.
happens about 4 or 5 times in which I join companies and they all have been acquired or gone public. In the same mode, then acquired by bigger companies and I lose my driving forces, which is a smaller startups, get going. Kind of. Do you want me to continue in the journey a little bit more?
Uh, I think we get the big picture of how that transition unfolded for you, and how you were presented with the right opportunities and the right people along the way
Yeah.
to steer you into medtech, and you added that flavor of technical technology into whatever product the company was developing at the time. But you mentioned a couple of times that need to acquire a language, a second language, English in this particular case. But I know that your career is accentuated by working across multiple cultures, multiple countries, even within the same week. And you're very hands on, as you've already shared. You talk about being in the operating room across different countries and working with side by side with the uh, medical staff, even speaking their language. And I want to contrast that with what the industry is going for, or it's been pushed into with today's innovation, AI specifically, and how that, in addition to remote monitoring and automated data capture, algorithm decision making, all those elements that are separating the human presence from the execution of the study, it is it's posing a necessary question, which is, where does being physically in the room give you an edge that technology can really replicate?
It's a great question. It's very important to feel the connection with the people in the room, the physician, the nurses, the assistant, whoever is in the room, you need to connect. And the best way that I found is to greet them in their own language, try to learn their own language. I mean, I was in Czech Republic, for the first time in my life, and Czech sounds like Polish, and I speak some Polish. So some of the words were similar, and I was able to communicate and humor the people in the room when I spoke. And I tried to sound like they do. I tried to mimic their movements, and I greet them like they do. And then all of a sudden, you become part of their team, and then the transition is seamless. I don't get all the comments. Obviously, the languages are more romantic, like French, Italian, or Portuguese. I'm more engaged. But on the other ones, I'm just as engaged. In fact, I mean, I speak some Japanese too. I have many Japanese colleagues, and they cannot believe it that I speak Japanese, and I sound like Japanese too. I make it sound like it, so I make the effort to do that. It's extremely, extremely important to connect especially nowadays in which you need the diversity of languages and cultures to succeed throughout, and that's has been great for me, honestly. When I when we develop clinical protocols, for instance, I remind the person writing the protocol that this is for a foreign reader. When we apply for clinical studies approvals outside of the United States, so the sentences should be short. So when the translator translates, it's a lot easier for him. If you go into a long run sentence, even though it's correct, grammatically correct, it is harder to translate and harder for the reader to communicate. So being mindful that the reader is a foreign person is important. So in every aspect, even the name of the product is important to make sure that everybody, or as much as possible, can say it, can pronounce it. So I'm mindful of those little details. So that's, in our company, we have multi cultures, multi nations. And what is beautiful behind that is that we all are, push in the same direction, which is the success of the product. I mean, we have worked with internally with people from China, Korea, South Africa, Czech Republic, Americans, obviously, because we're in the United States, Mexico. Now we're working with Brazil. I work with folk from Venezuela, Colombia, and multiple countries, Iran. It's just fantastic to feel that everybody's helping for the success of the project. At the end of the day, pain and suffering doesn't discriminate. A heart attack in here in the Silicon Valley, that pain and fear is exactly the same fear and pain that you have in Africa or in China. So it's an important aspect of the development of a product. This is for everybody. That's basically what I'm trying to say. It's a worldwide effort to bring, relief to people that are suffering.
Mhm. And making it universally accessible, it's something that I would I would suggest makes it more prone to success. Um,
Indeed, in fact, the communication with the doctors overseas, even here, in rural areas where there's no, maybe there's no floral machines or more technology, the doctors, are limited in resources. And this is here in the US too. I mean, certain places in Texas where there is no, advancement equipment, or they don't have the funds, now that they're trimming a lot of the medical care. It's important to have products that are accessible to everyone, or as much as possible. Obviously, we're in a business in which, we have to have to operate, you have to have profit, otherwise you will make it. Even non-profit organizations have to be profitable, otherwise they wouldn't be able to function. That's just the most basic of operational organizations have to be profitable. So we are also have to be profitable to succeed. Obviously, right now we're not in the commercial. We are operating a business with expenses only. There is no income, so we have to do with what we have, and I have to balance that. I developed the skill to be able to advance companies with limited resources and funding. The funding is what I have, and you have to move forward with what you have. That is the bottom line.
and that's exactly
So,
where I wanna take the conversation. You've built several ventures, and I'm curious to learn if there was ever a step back or a turning point that really reshaped the way you think about risk.
After, on the first half of my career working for companies and other companies, I told my wife, I've been doing this for a while now, and I noticed that we have done great. I enjoy what I do, but now it's time for me to move on my own. Yeah, unfortunately, it was in the year 2000, which was the worst year to start, a company because it was a collapse of, .com.
Mhm.
People were telling me, "Why don't you label your company .com and you'll be fine." But then, luckily, I got funded before, the bubble burst, and so I had a little bit of money. But 3 4 months into it, the incubator told me that they were folding because they didn't have money. So I asked them, what is going to happen to me? He said, well, you can buy the company back from us. I said, but make us an offer. So I made a really nominal offer because, I didn't have a lot of money. So, and they accepted. So I talked to my friend and mentor, Mr. Simpson, and said, Carl Simpson. And I said, Carl, what do we do? No, let's keep going. So we bought the company, and eventually the company was acquired by Boston Scientific. So it was a pretty good feeling. But that's when I realized that this is really, really, really what I want to do. I finally found my driving force. This doesn't come, entrepreneurship is something that is in you. It's not something that you can learn because there is a lot of ups and downs, more downs than ups. But it really doesn't matter. You have to believe in what you're doing and change. You have to change. You cannot continue in the same mode if things are not going your way. You need to be mindful and humble enough to say, this cannot working. But there are alternatives. It's not like it's not working, therefore it's dead. That's not the point. It's not working, change. That is the message, right? This comes from, my grandfather came from England, and recently I learned that he went through Ellis Island and then from then to South America. And so he was an immigrant, in South America, and he was also an entrepreneur. So some of these come from my family. Eventually, my grandfather passed away, and my grandma was a mother, uneducated with 5 children, with a business to run that she has absolutely no clue what to do. But there she was. So all of these teachings are ingrained in me, meaning obstacles and downfalls doesn't mean the end. That means you need to reroute and refocus, and you'll be fine. That's the message. And I do that to all my engineers, and when they get nervous about joining a company that's starting, what happens if you run out of money? Say, no, don't worry. I mean, even if you work for a larger company, the company comes and today is your last day. Nobody gets offended. They might give you a little severance and then you keep going. Obviously, it's not pleasant. Nobody likes that, but it happens even with big companies. I mean, Microsoft, they lay off 10,000 people, but nothing. Um, well, these big companies lay off thousands and thousands of workers all the time. And people find their ways in smaller companies or medium sized companies, or maybe people just decide to venture on their own. I decided to venture on my own, and I'm totally happy with that. And so this comes from seeing my grandpa, my grandmother, my mother, to all entrepreneurs, and it's in me. So that's what the driving force behind what I do. On top, I love the medicine. It, I'm not a physician, but I study a lot the problems and trying to gain from that to develop what I'm looking. My inspiration typically comes from gardening. I love gardening and flowers. I learn a lot from, seeing the little bugs, how they fly and I try to convert that into mechanical actions that can benefit what I'm working on. A while ago, no, I don't remember when, but I saw this possum walking along the fence, and they have this very weird shape on their face. To they grab worms. That's how they feed themselves. And so I said, "Wow, that's very interesting." So I looked into the anatomy of the possum, and I found that I could use that some of that to create a device, and I did that. I prototyped it with my technicians, and it was pretty good. It was very fulfilling. So nature is a big inspiration of my, my
And
inventions.
I would like to build from that into how you operate today, because one thing that you use a lot in your startups, and correct me if I'm wrong, is the idea that execution only works if the environment supports it, specifically the clinical, operational, and regulatory environments. And based off of that, you designed and executed the PROG strategy, which, for those who know it, it's considered uh, one of the textbook examples of how to run a multi-site study in parallel, and therefore be able to get approval in record time and at a dramatically shorter, time window compared to the US. But
Indeed.
beyond the speed, what is the philosophy behind it? What are you really optimizing for? And how is your evaluation process for the geography and those other non-negotiables that create that environment that allows you to find the correct clinical, operational, and regulatory environment?
Before you go into a clinic, you need to do your mechanical testing. One thing that I promised the doctor when I showed up at their site, I said, I cannot guarantee that what I'm bringing you will be effective. But when you push a button, the device will do what it's supposed to do because I've done all the testing on site, animal study, preclinical work before I venture into humans. The objective is to bring relief, not to hurt the person. So I'm mindful that the person on the other end needs the help. And my job is to bring a tool, a technology that will enable them to do that. Will they get better? Obviously, I hope so. And I've seen some of the preclinical results, but on preclinical work, is not the real, even though it's in a real is on a real subject, is not an ill patient. So a lot of the work is done behind, but very quickly. And we do not develop technology for veterinarians. We develop technology for physicians. So some companies tend to spend too much time on the preclinical side. Therefore, you start making changes to accommodate the model, and I don't. I do enough, but I like to move quickly into the clinic. And I bring the doctor that I'm working with to do the preclinical work with me. Once I do that, maybe once or twice, maybe three times, that's it. Then we are ready for human studies. So all this data is collected properly. Because all this information have to be gathered properly. That's the value of the company, the quality of your data. So when that you have that information, you can share with the ethics committee, you can share with the competent authorities. And again, if you write the protocol, thinking that the reader is a foreign person, they have less questions. In fact, in the Czech Republic, we had one question, we responded, and the approval happened in 1 day. So the whole process was 90 days from beginning until I was ready to start the study. 90 days. With one comment from the reviewer, and after that, it took us 1 day to get it approved. I just was like, incredible. So And with that, we began the process. I was a little bit nervous because it was the first case, but I was confident because the doctor trained with us, and he was very familiar. And that's the strategy. And I always like to do preclinical work, but not forever. Otherwise, we start changing the design to accommodate the model. And that is totally in my mind not the way to do it.
So move fast from preclinicals into clinicals, and uh, make sure that the philosophy between the one set of, let's say, professionals that are involved aligns with the ones in the clinical study, mediating
Yeah.
that with you being physically present in the room.
Indeed, always in every case. The last two cases in Prague was really interesting because remember from here, from Silicon Valley to Prague is 14 hours. So I used to get a call like 11 p.m., send a message to my team, said meet me at the airport. The next day we were flying to Prague. And then the next, basically 24 hours later, we were implanting the device on the patient. I mean, we couldn't wait. From the airport, we went straight to the hospital.
Hmm.
Not even checking in the hotel. And then 2 hours
And
later, the device was implanted and the patient is starting to recover. That is how we operate. And we did that 5 times. The last 2 times, we wanted to, the patient couldn't wait for us to arrive. So I said, why don't we do it via Zoom? So I set up the call, and my team was everybody in their home guiding the doctors in Prague. And it was a very successful study, both of them. And so we did a remote. That was kind of scary because you will be there, but it was physically impossible. So that was the best outcome. Showing the simplicity of the approach too, right? It was kind of beneficial, but I really wanted to be there.
and how does that kind of velocity affect the burn rate, the quality of data, and the ability to make confident decisions early on?
Well, again, the clinical protocol is very specific. What kind of data do you collect? We have a panel of things, and they have to check all the boxes. Otherwise, to include the patient, so it's very, very well scripted how you include the patient into the study. So, and we review that with the doctor and say, yeah, this is a good patient, but quickly, right? You need to move fast. And they know the anatomy and the symptoms a lot better than I do. So that's pretty much it. You move fast. That allows you also, like you said, to put your money, your investment, whatever money you have, into areas that will increase the value of the company, which is clinical results. We have electronic data systems, collecting the data. So on top of paper is the first one, but also we have electronics, so we have access to the result like pretty much right away. So our clinical team is reviewing the data and flagging, talking to the doctor. Is there something that doesn't align or something? So also sharing the result with the teams because you have to convince also your audience on the other side, the nurses, the physicians, the radiologists, whoever is involved, that we're doing good. So it's a constant reinforcement to the team where you're doing the clinical studies that what you're doing is good. You're not putting anybody at risk. Nobody got hurt. That adds value to. And if that is not the case, then you need to also say, what are you doing about it, right? And that's also another way because not always things go your way. So you need to inform them how you're going to resolve some of the issues that they're seeing. So in a way, your funds go towards in the right direction. Also, you're getting feedback. Like let's say your catheter is too rigid, I would like it to be more flexible. So you convey that information very quickly to the engineers. The engineers start working on it while we're doing more cases. We're getting more feedback. Um, Obviously, we do not change everything because otherwise, you don't know what change, cost a benefit. So you need to change a few things. I'm inclined to make one change at a time because then you know if it's beneficial or not. If you do two changes, you don't know which one is the benefit or causing the trouble. So anyway, that's kind
And
of philosophically how I feel, and I've been able to successfully control the burn rate in the company and add value at the same time.
Mhm.
And with those results you present at meetings, last year we were in Frankfurt, Germany, and before we were at TCT in San Francisco. And this year we were in Boston, in Washington, D.C. In May we were in Europe at the Euro PCR presenting two big in auditoriums. And also we joined a competition on innovation medical devices in which 80 companies participated, and we were selected at the top three in Europe. And this is huge for such a small company, with a novel approach. So we're
this
just,
was at the Paris Cardiology Conference.
yeah, Paris,
That's right.
yeah, in May, just a few weeks ago. So doctors come and see that's truly unique and out of the box. That was the comment throughout. This is an out of the box approach, very unique, very clever, and they want to see more. So when they want to see more, that means I have to work harder to provide more, feedback, more results, and not lose the momentum. Because once you lose the momentum, then you have to climb harder, So, but always innovate, vision and execution all along. Vision and execution is the driving load.
And I definitely want to explore that topic further, the PercAssist. But before moving on to that, I wanted to mention something that you do differently, and it has to do with the capital strategy, which is where you've done something unique, really, uh, taking the traditional regulatory requirement of a clinical evaluation report and turning it into part of your financial strategy. How did that idea come together, and how does it actually work in practice?
Well, when you get engaged into a project right from the get go, you need to know what are regulatory hurdles in the US, first of all. Are you a PMA? Are you 510K? If you are a 510K, well, some people like that, investors, like it. But the challenge is that you have to prove adoption in the market for a 510K device. So you need to have some level of sales, and that requires, investment. And it might slow down some of your, you know, innovation, depending on how much money they have in the bank. But to bring a product to market is very expensive in the US. I mean, the Bay Area, I think you have like 10 hospitals at least. And how can you serve with one or two salesmen? It'll be impossible. That means you need more, and more means more expensive. So you need to prove probably it's best to go overseas, gather more clinical data, and so this is our intent. Don't be shy about talking to FDA. There is nothing wrong to talk to them early on. There is no, they're not going to punish you for talking to them. In fact, it's best to share your story with them. So you go in the right path. They get to know you when you go to meetings. They will be there. Trust me, I've seen them. they're listening to your presentations. So to hide or to try to pretend that you don't exist or you have done something, as long as you do something that is ethical and legal, it's fine. It doesn't have to be in the US. So get data early on outside of the US in countries in which FDA have no issues, right? Because if you're going to go to a country in which they don't believe the data, then that's a big problem. So that's kind of the strategy. Early on, engage with FDA, and also with that philosophy, you can go into other countries. Granted, in other countries, the hurdles regulatory are bigger. It's mostly administrative. It has nothing to do with the technology. It's just a nightmare in paperwork. Sometimes you need to find countries that are more amicable to advancements in medicine. Which ones are those? The ones that get ethics committee approval first. And then with that you apply to the government. Other countries they say no, you have to have a approval by the country and then ethics committee. That is not beneficial because that doesn't help. So it's better to have ethics committee approval first. With that information, you go to the competent authorities and look, the doctors already liked it, already approved it, think this is safe. So it's a good way to position the product.
I see. Okay. Stepping back to the broader market, having considered all these strategic decisions early on, when when do you start thinking about a merger or an acquisition, and what does it mean in today's environment for a founder to really know that they're ready for that step? What does it actually mean, or what do they need to be? Where do they need to be in order to be ready beyond having promising data?
Well, obviously, you have to be in a market that there is a need, right? And, and fulfill need. Everybody, obviously, and rightly so, think that they have developed something that is fulfills that market need. But you have to gauge how you compete against existing established technologies. Like one of the companies that I'm kind of not quite direct to compete, they have been in business for 25 years. They have $1 billion in sale, $1 billion in sales, and they were acquired for a huge amount of money. That's a competitor. That's tough, but that doesn't mean they own the market. That doesn't mean that you cannot bring new things. That just means actually it's good that it's good that they are in the market because that shows that there is a need, right? And so competition is good, by all means. In fact, since we're ahead of all the companies that work in the extravascular space, they're cheering for us. They say, keep going, it's good what you're doing. These are my near competitors, right? Send me messages and, so keep at it because it's good for all of us. And I agree. I don't mind sharing some of what you see on the screen is what we're able to disclose to the public. So there's nothing to hide. So working with competition is good. I'm not going to give them all the secrets, obviously, but they can read, they can see the results. So competition is good. That's the bottom line. And that's Silicon Valley mentality. Otherwise, there will be no innovation. And also, talking about the speed, here you have, laser people, machinists, you have software, hardware engineers that, now with the AIs, many of them are available to work. Actually, a lot more than before. So, material scientists, We're very close to NVIDIA, so there's a lot of engineers available now to join companies like us. And we can share our vision. People get excited when they see what we're working on. That's what you need, people that, are excited coming to work every day with, hey, I was thinking about this, what do you think? And I encourage them to do it, execute, and come back with, and then I give them my ideas. Hey guys, what do you think? This is what I'm thinking. I couldn't stop thinking about it. Can we prototype it or something? And see, sometimes it's pretty cool. Then people get more engaged and more enthusiastic about what we do. Regarding at what point do you start talking to a strategic? When you have enough evidence that you have something that is repeatable, and it doesn't take a lot of cases to do that. And it's not automatic either. It's, they might invest first, good, allows you to move forward with the technology, innovate more, and then second step, say, well, then we would like to move forward with something more, meaningful, maybe a stage the acquisition or something, and meet these objectives, and then we'll do first payment and so on. There are many ways to do that. In between, obviously you need to stay alive, so the investor that you work with, they need to support you. And that's, you give them updates every so, not all the time, but maybe twice a year kind of thing. It's good. Otherwise, you'll be spending hours and hours trying to, update everybody, and you'll have calls all day long. But it hasn't been that way yet. So everything is moving forward the way I envision, and just don't stop. Conditions change. For instance, the grants are obviously gone. The government grants that many companies used to get are no longer available. But now I think they're starting to surface again. But there are other organizations like the American Heart Association. They also have grants. And I learned this recently, so I'm gonna apply for that and give you exposure, to their meetings and other entities that are interested in what you're working on. We are a worldwide company. That's a fact. I'm telling you, that is the case. We are a company for the world. We are not for one country.
Mhm. And I would like to bring it back precisely to PercAssist and ultimately how this product works with one of the maximums of cardiology, which is time is muscle. Every delay has a real consequence into the outcome of the patient. So, how does the EVAT system fit into that timeline, and how does it change the equation compared to existing options like Impala or ECMO?
Well, first of all, the little e from EVAT is because we're extravascular. That alone removes a lot of the issues that we have seen in current technologies: bleeding, sepsis, hemolysis, infections, vascular damage, because we do not enter the vasculature. Peripheral artery disease, because when you put a catheter to your groin, you're potentially blocking flow to the limbs. And, that's not ideal. But we access the heart via subxiphoid, which is below the sternum, straight into the left ventricle, deploy the device between underneath the rib cage, but on top of the heart, in the space called the pericardium. Then we synchronize our device with the patient's cardiac rhythm. So, and our balloon technology inflates only in systole. That's what the patient needs the most. What we're different, again, we're extravascular. What we have discovered is that even though we don't press on the right ventricle, we do produce a right ventricular effect. So our technology is for produces a biventricular, you know, effect on the person, helping the left and the right ventricle at the same time. And that's a big thing because for right ventricular failure, there is not much people can do. The options are limited. So the fact that we're extravascular have opened doors, and the fact that we are biventricular is becoming extremely interesting in the interventional cardiology and heart failure space. So we are very unique in that sense.
And was this part of what you shared at the cardiology conference in Paris? Can you tell us
Yes.
a bit about the experience and what does that recognition mean for your team and the position of PercAssist?
Well, there were 22,000 attendees at the Euro PCR, even more than the TCT, and other meetings in the US. Probably the American Heart is it might be a little bigger than that, but the beauty about the Euro PCR is the exposure from the entire European community, but also worldwide. There were a lot of people from the Middle East and from Asian countries too. So it's a moral. The exposure is fantastic because it gives you more broader range. You know, in, there was, I think there was a cardiology meeting in Abu Dhabi that I missed it because I was planning on preparing for our next human trial, so I couldn't go. But just to show you, in the Middle East, there is a huge need for technology in the heart failure space. Who would think, right? I mean, that they do. As I said, this problem, the more I look into it, is oh my God, it's getting bigger and bigger. And in Southeast Asia has the highest level of heart failure, like 7.5% of the population, compared to the US or Europe, which is 3.5%. And South America about the same too. A lot of smokers, a lot of fried food, delicious obviously, but it's not the healthiest. Um, you know, neither is eating bacon, right? But
Yes.
but
Well,
we
you're
all
gonna
like
have to
it.
die somehow.
Somehow, might as well be eating bacon, be happy.
Yeah.
I don't know. So the exposure in the European Union, the reception, making it to the top three was fantastic. It was so fulfilling. And Dr. Krukov did a fantastic presentation. And then the biventricular effect was presented by Dr. Van Michen, Nicholas Van Michen, the up and coming researcher in the European Union. Extremely wonderful guy to work with. And we love when he comes, his excitement, and it's very contagious to work with people like that. So Nicholas has become a great friend, and I love working with him, and my team likes him a lot too.
Well, Gerardo, this has been a fantastic conversation. And as we mentioned before, there's this saying that time is muscle, but it applies just as much in innovation as it does in cardiology. And everything that you've shared with our audience today, every yeah strategy or perspective, philosophy adds to that. So that very very practical blueprint for navigating the challenges of um, medtech and innovation in the spaces has been of great value to us. So thank you, and thank you for the work you're doing. As you say, it's a PercAssist is a company that solves a worldwide problem that I know it's gonna impact the lives of many people around the world. And for our listening listeners, until next time, and keep accelerating. Thank you, Gerardo.
It's a journey, and for whatever it's worth, if somebody wants to follow the path, it worked for me. Find your, maybe some of these hints and tips will helpful for small startup companies. All the best to all of you, and thank you, Jesus and Julio. All the best for including me in your podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing with us. Okay. Until next time.